Hi, good morning, Ms. Caballero. Shane Superville from the Newsday newspaper here. Firstly, I just want to say thanks for taking the time to be able to speak with me here in this forum. Um, really and truly, I'm trying to reach out to some of the survivors or some of the relatives of those who would have been involved in the 1990 attempted coup, just to kind of get some feedback from your experiences, what you would have recalled from that time, and really and truly what you think the legacy of the insurrection would have been coming up on 30 years after the fact. I understand that your mom, Miss Lorraine Caballero, unfortunately was one of the people who would have been killed during the insurgency. Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay, so, well, first of all, let me just get some background information on you. For instance, your age and, your upbringing, if you grew up here in Mount Dor or if you grew up elsewhere.
Yes, I was brought up here in Mongor, the same spot, well, downstairs where the house was.
Mm-hmm.
Right, the house was built a couple of years ago. And I'm 32 years of age now,
Mm-hmm.
so not can't really give you much information on the coup itself because,
Yeah,
right, I
of
was
course.
just a baby basically.
Mm-hmm.
And how it affected me is a very long story. It still is affecting me up to today,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Take your time. I know it's a difficult experience to have to go and go through right now.
it's difficult. I really want to say, I can't say.
I understand.
Yeah.
Uh, Growing up, because you were only 2 years old at the time, so you would not have had much memories of what was going on. Growing up, hearing about what had happened when you started to come of age into your own consciousness, maybe in your teens, into your 20s, and so on, you hear it not just from, well, we would have heard about what I would have heard what have happened because I was born after the fact through television and through what my parents told you. Was your dad around at any point, and if so, what did he or other relatives tell you about what happened at the time?
Well, yes, my father was around. My mother used to live with my father, my two brothers.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And my father said she left to go to work the Friday morning,
Mm-hmm.
and my eldest brother asked her to stay at home. It was Afeisha Caballero, but he is deceased.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, no, I can't stay home. I have to collect salary.
Mm.
See, I was mountain and all of
What
that.
did she do for a living? Sorry to cut
She
across.
was a clerk in the Red House.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she was a clerk. In fact, clerk too. That's the lady was clerk too.
Mm-hmm.
And she went to work, and she just never came back home. The next time they did see her, wasn't nobody back.
Your dad, and you said your now deceased brother, he would have been around at the time.
Yeah, my sister would have been about 9, and my other brother would have been about 7.
Hmm. And how did they find out about it? Did someone from the police notify them, or were they just, left to wonder what happened?
They were just left to wonder what had happened, according to what my dad said. Said no one contacted him at the point in time. We just realized Friday evening, watching the television, realized, okay, police been under attack, the Red House under attack. It's, my mommy reached home here Saturday morning, same thing, and they decided, okay, well, something had to be wrong. Yeah. And they did see her again.
Hmm.
She was gone.
Now, obviously, this would have been in the time before cell phones and the internet age that we have right now. So, word was much more slower to travel than we have today. Did they at any point, or I don't know if they would have told you, did they try to, make a contact to where she was going or to any authorities to see if they could try and track her down?
That I can't answer,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't think they could have, they would have done that or could have done that because she was at work.
Yes.
So they were probably thinking, okay, she get caught up in traffic, so she's
Mm-hmm.
not home yet. But on Saturday morning, reached and she wasn't home, and no one heard or saw anything.
Mm-hmm.
They knew something bad had happened.
At what age would you say that you could kind of gauge that, my mom is not around and I know that something bad happened to her long ago?
Actually, I knew my mom was dead for about the age of 11. I went to a close by shop, and the lady in the shop just asked me what I came for, and I told her, and like, mom so sent me for the child. you know your mommy died, right? And I was like, no, mommy, not dead, mommy, home. Because I grew up calling my grandmother mommy. And she said, no, mommy, no. She said, no, your mommy died, your mommy passed away, your mommy get corn and dead. And I was like, huh? So I ended up eating corn because I was like, okay. And
Wow.
my father wasn't living with us at that point in time because we had a little difference in the family. So he was living elsewhere. So when I did see my daddy, I asked him, I was like, Dad, thing. I came home and I was telling my grandmother I was crying. She's like, no, girl, I your mother thing. I said, okay. And then my father and explained to me, he said, see, now she's telling you now.
Mm-hmm.
Might as well tell you now, yes, your mom used to go to the Red House and she was murdered. Right, while on duty, and he explained to me, he showed me a picture of her. And then I got a picture and I put it in the house.
Hmm.
And I think that's around the time when I had brothers also. I didn't know I had brothers either. I was thought I was only a child.
Hmm. I mean, that's a really harrowing story you just explained it, because for the first 11 years of your life, you didn't know that the woman you were calling mommy wasn't actually your mommy, it was just your grandmother. When you found that out at the time, how did you feel about that? How did you feel about your family?
The same way I still feel about him today.
Hmm. Is that a good way or a bad way, or just kind of conflicted?
It depends on the person looking into to know, that kind of way.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm here with them, because there's only family I know. If I could turn back the answer, I wouldn't.
Hmm. I mean, the whole history and the legacy of the coup is so many different things rolled into one. I think tragic is probably one of the most recurring themes, because life as we know it in Trinidad was never the same way again. But I think it was particularly painful for people who would have lost relatives during that time. And you are someone who would have experienced that pain firsthand. As best as you could describe it, some people on one side, you know, they criticized the Jamaat for what they did. Other people on the other side would, oddly enough, criticize the government, because they would say that, they were partly responsible for the conditions that gave birth to the insurrection in the first place. When you look and you hear about people, media people like myself, I don't know, former military people, police officers who would have been on the ground at that time, you hear the stories that they would have had to offer. What's your thoughts on the insurrection itself? What do you think? Do you think it was justified, or do you think it was just unexcusable?
Unexcusable. Unexcusable. I used to 30 years after, I still want to know what it was over. A piece of land, someone talk, what it was over. To this day, that's the answer I want to know. Why did she lose her life then? And for what? Why?
Hmm.
Okay, he went to TTT, he said, women and children to be released. So, okay, cool. So, in my mind, I was saying, she was working in the Red House, okay. Okay, he said, okay, let the women go there also. And on her way out, it could have been the soldiers who killed her. It could have been the Muslims who killed her. It could, up to this day, I don't have an idea who is really responsible for her death.
Hmm.
We don't know who was the person who shot her and why. Other people lost their lives too, but I can't speak about them. And I don't think I could rally for them. Like, I don't know what them have to go through or what them went through, but I know it because I'm living. Yeah. And people say how you make it better, so you lie on it, but sometimes the cards that you get into in life is where you have to play.
Hmm.
Yeah. And my bed was made for me from small, so all I could do right now is just look for a new cover to change it. And it's
Oh.
really hard, it's hard.
Based on everything you would have experienced growing up, you found out about, the conditions of your family at home was not the way how you thought it would have been. Because you said that you grew up calling your grandmother mommy,
Mm-hmm.
and in your mind that's who she was.
Mm-hmm.
How has that really affected your worldview and how you look at TNT as a country? Because on one hand, I suppose you could say, all of this was just a matter of chance. And then on the other hand, some people would argue that all of this could have been avoided. How do you look at, concepts like justice and inequality and so on today?
But in terms of justice, I don't think anything was done that can really give the victims any kind of justification that's, you know, that, yeah, okay, be responsible, or he is responsible, or whoever is responsible, and to put things in place to work with that, to make sure that everybody get that justice, everybody get that peace that they're looking for within themselves. Because I have people who experience the coup firsthand, like Mr. Eversley, for example, right? He experienced my mother's death firsthand. He said he watched her die, right? And he's a man coming around this time of the year, always walk from Marima to Portisville, that kind of way, trying to bring people together, always what he did there, pray. And he himself, I think that he and I should get a little justice because he was experiencing it firsthand, right? I don't know anybody else that really was there presently. I only hear about that way. And in terms of that, we need some kind of qualification, right? If you're to be able to, and what I don't like is that coming around this time of the year is when time people remember 1992. Only come in July time, and then as July come and finish, it's all over again. The coup never happened. And guys, I find that is not right, because look at America, for example, 9/11. It will be in tongues of Americans for the rest of their lives. The children are going to speak about it, the children are going to speak about it. Children are going to be just like, yeah, well, back at call a coup and he staged a coup and he failed. Yeah, some people there don't know, and I said, yeah, Pandy went to and sleep. Yeah, man, and I walk out the bread house just before it happened, and I just sit. And nobody, like, you know what, because why? We as the people on the ground, not in a position to fight the higher authorities to get answers that kind of way. And it's just like, do they just okay? Yeah. Mr. Robinson died, okay, rest his soul in peace. See, and all, I find when in his time, or when the inquiry was taking place, I find he didn't give much clarification on it at the point in time. As the person who held the position in society, yeah, he didn't give enough clarification for me at that point in time as to what really transpired. Yes, he got shot, but to me, everything like a whole front, like a whole thing. Mr. Manning and Mr. Pandy walk out the parliament just before. Pandy telling you I break up when it's over. All these things, they look like everybody doesn't know exactly what was taking place. And tell Mr. Waka, well, okay, well, you do what you want then, and see if you will still get what it is you want then. And they don't care.
Did you at any point, because I imagine you would have been relatively young, probably in your 20s or late teens, did you ever have to appear before the inquiry?
Yes, I did. I appeared every single day. I testified, and every day I was there present for every single hearing.
What was that experience like, having to go through all of those emotions?
It was a trying process, but it also made me a stronger person. Yeah. To listen to all the different stories, meet all the different people. The only person I really wanted to see was Mr. Baka, but he said he couldn't come because he had another case going on in Hall of Justice, so he to the country. He took cases, he come to testify on the coup. I find the ministry or government should have made him come to the court and testify. Then we get his take on it. He's the only person and get his take on why he do it and why he walking free after all these years.
So you never seen him face to face in person?
Yeah, when I was much younger, I went by the masjid.
Were you taken there, or so you went of your own volition?
No, just to get to see him and get to talk with him, but he didn't have the time at the point in time. And then I went back a couple of years ago, coming close to Eid, but he wasn't there at the masjid, and I left a message. He didn't contact me or anything,
So you never contacted, well, never had any face-to-face interaction with him?
And I want to, I really want to, I want to speak with him, just to get a little peace of mind. I think he's the only person who could give me that peace of mind besides myself, that kind of way.
If you could speak to him, what would you say?
I'd rather tell him that.
Fair enough. Well, you hear so much different things coming out of the attempted coup. Some of it may be factual, some of it not so much. Based on your understanding, because I could only imagine based on what you're describing, you would have spoken to a number of different people who were actually there and who are also experts on the matter, so to speak. What do you think is one of the biggest pieces of misinformation, as far as you know, that has come out of the stories behind the insurrection?
biggest piston for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What about the cause?
What what was it really for? Yeah. I
Mm-hmm.
don't have a problem with whoever did whatever they did, but everything happened for a reason, right? And every action is cause a reaction. So what it is, what was so worth, what was it?
Mm-hmm.
Why was it worth it so much to risk your life, all these men lives, and the country life? What was it? What was the cause of what was so important? Okay, they just didn't care anymore about anybody else. Not even you care about yourself, because you put yourself in line, this is the same way too.
Mm.
Yeah. What was so important?
Um, well, ironically enough, just a couple of weeks ago, in fact, it was just last week, we saw, obviously not nowhere near on the same scale as what we saw in 1990, but a series of fiery protests in Port of Spain. And, well, not just in Port of Spain, but across the country, which actually prompted a response from the National Security Minister as well as the Police Commissioner, basically warning those involved that there would be no repeat of what we saw 30 years ago in terms of a destabilization of the government. When you look at the conditions that happened back then, compared to the conditions we have now, some would argue it's gotten better, others would contend it's gotten worse. Do you think we've learned the lessons coming out of 1990, or do you think that we still have yet to come to terms with everything coming out of it?
We still have to come to terms. We still have to learn. Yeah, because that was a lesson that was being taught then and there. I don't think a lot of us learned it yet.
Why is that?
Okay, as I say, we don't know the reason why the attempted coup took place, right?
Mm.
Right. So yes, a lot of people lost their lives. So if Mr. Abubakar now being a leader that he is, if in his mind was something good he was doing it for, why we still having this pulling and tugging and riffing this one, that one territory thing, politicians still going about living their lives the way that they're doing it,
Mm-hmm.
not caring about the people who putting them there, that type of way. So we ain't learn nothing else.
You still think we should, try and observe what came out of that?
Yeah.
Ideally, what would you like to see come out of it? Because I know you would have spoken earlier about really families of those involved, like yourself, getting some kind of closure. What do you have in mind, or what would you suggest?
I think we should keep the 27th of July as a day of remembrance. Not a public holiday because we have enough holidays,
Mm-hmm.
but a day of remembrance of the country, so that it will remain in history. As the years go by, my children could know, my children's could know, that kind of way. So everybody could know that people lost their lives, and we also know why they lost their lives too. Yeah, there's a reason why all these officers, all these workers, everybody was just there and went to work Friday morning and never returned home.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so a day of remembrance, a day of prayer that would be nice to me. Right, so at least the country could come together on that particular day and fast and pray, or come together and remember everybody, whether good or bad,
Mm-hmm.
right? And for the families, including myself, I think that the government or whoever, whether it's the government or Mr. Obaka, could do something like this, try to make the family feel a little more comfortable in society. That kind of way.
Do you believe that he actually owes us that?
Yeah,
Society?
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. I believe that.
Just to kind of go back to the whole issue of the Commission of Inquiry and, his release effectively. It's what a lot of people would consider to be a somewhat controversial part of the timeline of the coup itself. Many people often ask, how is it that one man, and we know who it is, organized all of this, was able to do this, and yet he's out here, you know, living life as best as he could. When you found out what had happened, and you found out that he also was released, how did that make you feel?
It made me feel like I could have gone to the same people that he went to and get the guns and hold up the country just the same way too. I just hold up the country here and he can't get away. That's how it made me feel. To see that he could do it and get away with it. So if he can as a normal man, who's me?
I understand. Do you still feel the same way to this day, or?
Leaving him to go. That point, yeah, but leaving him to go.
Well, I imagine you have children of your own right now. You know, we live in Trinidad, and as you rightfully said, every July 27th, we see these specials on television, see it in the newspapers. It's very difficult to escape. We knew that there is this chapter of TNT history that was very dark, very controversial. When they ask about what happened that day, because I would imagine that, you know, when they are in school, the topic also comes up as well. What do you tell them?
I just tell them what happened that day. That is the day that my life was torn apart. As God is the boss and He knows best, but to me, I still thinking that if I had my mother's support and love and all of that, although I had all of that from my grandmother, I'm not saying no, things would have been different. I would not have been living the way that I am. I would not around certain society, you know, that kind of way never. Should have pushed and make sure that I get out of the ghetto that kind of way.
And you don't think that that happened now that, well, you don't have her?
Yeah. Because I say it's really family, I know. Now that I'm an adult now, yes, so I could move on and I could move out, but move out and go where? But how? Just come like I release a baby into the free world and say go on, just run wild. You go out there and just survive how you can on the streets. That kind of way. No, it don't make sense that I leaving from one point to go to the other point where I don't know anything about. And then if you really society, I wouldn't survive out there without a foundation at a certain place and to go up on my own level.
30 years is a long period of time by any measure. It's 3 decades. What do you think is one of the major, I mean, I would have spoken about it briefly before, but in your opinion, what do you think is one of the major lessons we have learned or have yet to learn coming out of the coup in 1990?
The lesson of island, can't speak for the entire country, the lesson island is because yeah, we was more than Trinidad and Tobago, once you know the right people.
Wow. One thing I forgot to ask you, I would have interviewed, well, as part of the same series, I would have interviewed retired brigadier, Ansel Antoine, who was at the front lines of what was going on. And he said that I think there was a relative of your mom, I don't know if it was a cousin or someone who was also a soldier at the time. I don't know if you know him personally or if he, because the way how he explained it to me was that when Baka and his men were surrendering at TTT, where the cousin was stationed, he went around to various soldiers who were outside at the time and basically took the round out of the chamber because he did not want any quote-unquote misfiring at the insurgents, because there were a lot of to say the least, there was a lot of bad blood between both the regiment and the Jamaat at the time. You know, did you ever meet up with his relative who was in the army at the time, or you know any? Okay. Alright. Is there anything you would like to say? Because I think I would have rounded up everything I had to ask at least. Is there anything in addition that you would like to say that I may not have asked or forgot to ask? Right. Well, again, ma'am, really apologize for having to, come and have you revisit all of these thoughts and everything. Even 30 years after, it's clear that, these are still things that are unresolved, not just for you as a person, but for, TNT, because a lot of people are still divided over who was right, who was wrong, and what we're going to do
And
next.
people still don't even know what the coup was.
Hmm.
When they hear what the coup was, like, what?
What was that? Yeah.
What are you talking about?
And I understand what you're saying, because as a young person, because I'm not 30 years yet, so I didn't live through the events. There are a lot of my peers who don't understand and they just genuinely don't know. And I don't know if they're interested to know or not, but that just seems to be the way it is.
Recently, I went to the hospital with a friend on Monday, and a gentleman was telling me, where in the world do you know someone keep an attempted coup with 2 people dead? I was like, oh, 2 people alone that died in the coup. And he was telling me, some police officer was like, well, no, my mother was one who died in
Yeah.
the coup too. And the man was arguing with me in the hospital, and I was getting so angry. I was like, why does she want to argue with me? And he looked like he looked like he was about 40 somebody years old.
Mm.
And he was like, Fanny, I telling you 2 people down there in the coup, and tell that I was back and walking free. And I was like, no, sir. A lot of people died.
Mm-hmm.
Over 40 some people died that day
Yeah.
that I know of. And he was like arguing with me. I was like, you see, people still don't know what really happened.
What do you think? Well, I mean, we in the media, we like to think that we do our try, or at least try to do a good job of informing people and keeping people informed. You see gentlemen like that, and he's not the only one. There are a lot of people out there like him who think that, there were only 2 people who got killed. Some of them might even argue with you and say nobody got killed. What do you think people could do again to try and inform the public out there the seriousness of what happened and trying to, learning from these lessons? Is there anything else left for us to do, or do we have to kind of rely on their good sense to try and do their own research?
Yeah, we think we gotta just rely on them to do the research, because the media does what pretty alright. It says when you coming around this time of the year, it'll be exposed much, right?
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes in between you slip it in when you go in. I can like on TV, you can introduce something like how they have Throwback Thursdays
Mm-hmm.
and all these things. They could have a parallel history segment for the country. That could be part of it. That could be a topic. That can be part of the topic.
Mm-hmm.
Because other things happen in the country before where I and all didn't know about until.
Mm-hmm. Alright.